Hello, everyone. I'm Johnnie Alexander, and I'm welcoming you back to the second part of my interview with author Curt Iles. Enjoy. Let's talk about your trips to Uganda and to Africa.
Yeah.
And then you were telling me before we start recording about your other job as a chaplain, too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's talk
Um,
about
I work part-time we're a pine timber area, and
that.
the largest timber employer is called Royal Martin Corporation. Excellent Christian organization. They, through a agency in Texas, hire chaplains for the meals.
Mhm.
So this morning I was in a plywood mill, visiting workers. I went to see a worker who'd had a recent non-job accident. Uh, and I just get to know them. It's a 1 day a week job, but I love it
Awesome.
because I'm with very, very blue collar people, and I'm a blue collar person. And when I put my safety gear on and go in the mill, I'm one of them. And you have to build relationships.
Yes.
But when they're hurting, someone's in jail, someone's had a death, or they're in the hospital, or they're having problems, they call on me. And it's been a very rewarding job that I have. The company I work for is called Marketplace Ministries. They're out of Plano, Texas. And the reason I want to give them a plug, there are 3,000 of them all over the United States and Canada, employees. And you don't have to be a pastor. I'm not a pastor. I was a teacher, school teacher. And I really, really enjoy my work as a chaplain. I get some good stories from them too.
I bet you do. I bet you do.
I mean, especially at the meal I was at today, they're from this area I write about. And a lot of them have read my books, and they're kind of that. Now, you were asking about Uganda. I don't know if you remember that right after you and I met.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
In 2012, my wife, Dee Dee, retired after 33 years of teaching.
Oh, wow.
And we had raised our sons. They were all on their own. We paid off our house, and we'd always had this dream of doing some longer term missions. We'd done these 2 weeks, even a month during the summer. And our denomination has a program where you can go for 2 years if you're over 50. And we were right at 58. And we said, why wait till we're 70? Joints are bad. Let's go. So we pulled a Bilbo Baggins. That's what I call myself, Bilbo. We left the Shire. We sold our house. We had an estate sale. And the Lord ended up placing us in Uganda. And our field work, though, was in South Sudan. And just as we were moving there, a war broke out in South Sudan, which rages to this day. So then our work shifted to refugees. Now, my original job, Johnny, was writing. I was writing about people groups. We would go live among these people groups, and they would tell me their stories, and I would write about it. Well, when the refugee crisis happened, we shifted to humanitarian work, and I became a water well driller.
Wow.
And I worked. Our denomination supplied the funds, and I was the contractor, and I dealt with the corruption and red tape, and I can't explain to you how difficult things are in Africa. But everywhere we drilled a water well, a church was started, and those churches have multiplied. Well, a week from today, really, I'm going back to Uganda, and I'll spend 2 weeks teaching our seminary, and then there'll be men and women from 7 countries across Africa. And many of them will have left their fields to come to seminary. They've walked through war zones, ridden on boats to get there. And I'll teach for 2 weeks. I'm very excited about that. Then I'll go up country to northern Uganda, where I will be once again among our refugees, seeing what's happened here. And so this would be my first trip back since we left in 2015. So I'm very excited about it.
Is your wife already over there?
My wife leaves Friday.
Okay.
And they are going to Kenya.
Okay.
To a women's conference to
wow.
teach women how to tell Bible stories. And the way folks can pray for that is much of this camp is called Kakama Camp. Nearly 200,000 people. 200,000 people. And it's like a city. And a large group of the inhabitants there, refugees, are Somalians,
Mhm.
Eritreans, and Ethiopians. Those are three countries the gospel has a hard time getting into, but there they are. They're in a refugee camp.
Yeah.
And Dee Dee and Colleen and our team will be teaching these believing women from these tribes how to tell these stories, and they'll go back to their part of the camp and tell the stories. So,
Oh,
you
that's
know,
awesome.
we're getting to really do some neat things at this season of our life. I call this the season that we're at. Um,
Wow.
I don't believe we ever retire. I don't believe we ever are finished. Uh,
That's
Be
that's
writing, but I also plan to be involved in missions and,
I love it.
and like my missions, part of it's at a plywood mill, and part of it for the next month's going to be in Africa.
Yeah.
The Christian life is an exciting life.
It
It's
is an
not a.
exciting life.
It
But I
is.
remember when, I was getting your newsletter, and so I knew you were doing this, and I remember um, when you talked about selling your home, and I my family kind of moves around. So even like we have my family in Southern Ohio have been there since late 1700s, but my grandparents had moved north, and then I've moved all around, and so I'm always a little envious, and I've said this in other interviews, of people who have just been like you have that, and like I do know where my older ancestors are buried, and we go there sometimes, but it's like you're just still in it, and my heart kind of cracked when you said you were selling your home, because wasn't that like an old family?
No, no, it wasn't.
Oh,
Let me
because
clarify
I
this.
was like, ooh.
I want to clarify this. The old family home that we call the old house, which was born in 1892, it's priceless. It belongs to a whole group of us as heirs.
Okay.
My mother lives next door to it. My two sisters live there. The house we sold was about 5 miles away. Now we lived in it 30 years.
So it would still have been your home for a long
Yeah,
time.
it
I
was
mean,
our home and where we raised our boy. In fact, it bothered our three sons way more that we sold it than us.
I did it.
But we felt like we wouldn't move back to Dry Creek. Dry Creek's my hometown
Mm-hmm.
where we live in, because our sons didn't live there. 7 of our grandchildren live in Alexandria.
And that's where you are now.
So my wife informed me, and while we moved on to Curt, when we go back, we're moving to Alexandria. It took me a while because, Johnny, I'd never lived in an incorporated area before. Really, I'd never lived in a place. And Alexandria is about 65,000 people. To me, it's like Houston.
It's too big, huh? Oh my
But
goodness.
we love it. We love it. I learned in Africa, you can be happy anywhere if you're serving the Lord and you're with
Yeah.
the person you love the most, which is
You
my wife.
can.
But
But
we're now with I'll go to a baseball game tonight. We were in church with our grandchildren yesterday. So 7 of the 8 live here. One
that's
lives in
great.
Boston.
But I mean, yeah, we said before, I'm jealous because my grandchildren are all up Florida and Missouri, and I'm in Oklahoma right now. So yeah, yeah. Um, just I think though too, it just showed such a commitment. I mean, when you say we're going to Africa and we're selling everything, and
We just
and
felt like we were doing what we're supposed to do.
yeah, wow.
But I do want to clarify that we have the old house, and
Okay,
even
good.
though
Because I was like, oh.
even though I live in Alexandria, I go every week to get my Dry Creek fix. I go to check on my mom. My mom is 83, and I enjoy drinking coffee with her. And I work my land. I have some land. I planted
Yeah,
pine, and I work on that old house. And so I stay till the sun goes down, so I can see how the stars look at night in the country. So I have dual citizenship, but we're very happy living where we live.
good.
Let me tell you a funny thing about Alexandria. It's called Alec. It's a
Alex.
nickname for it. But we spell that Alex. If you
Mm-hmm.
saw it, you would, in fact, when you read As a Crow Flies, it explains that. You would think that they're calling it Alex.
Yeah, you would.
But the short name for Alexandria is, hey, I'm driving into Alec. You need anything from Logan? That's another thing, Johnny. Where we lived in Dry Creek, it was an hour to Academy, 30 minutes to Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I can walk to either one of those if I want to.
Oh,
So I believe this in life. Everything's a trade-off.
it
And the
is.
main reason we moved here is to be among our grandkids.
Sure. Because
And
that family's so important. I mean, you
my
want to pass on
goodness,
those
I
stories.
want to influence them.
You
I
absolutely do.
love being with them. So,
You absolutely do. Any chance that you would be writing novels set in Uganda after having spent time there, or are you just going to stick with
well, I do have one book that I wrote,
Oh, do you?
Trampled Grass. It's one of
Okay.
my 13. I
Okay.
published it just as I got back from Africa. And what it does, it tells the story of the refugees northern Uganda. And it's a blend of short stories. Some will make you cry, some will make you laugh, some will make you laugh and cry and the
As
same story.
soon as you said the title, it's like, oh yeah, I remember, reading about
Yeah.
that. So yeah.
Yes, it's a famous saying in Africa that when two elephants fight, the grass gets trampled.
Mhm.
And what's happened in South Sudan is the two leaders, who are from two different tribes, have chosen to destroy their country by fighting. And so that's how I picked out the title for it. And I'll be honest with you, it's not so great, but to people who are interested in what's going on over there, it's good. So I did write a book about Africa. It's my only book that doesn't feature Louisiana, but in its own way, Johnny, it does. A lot of the stories in Trampled Grass compare what I found in Uganda to traditions in Louisiana.
Wow.
It's been an interesting book to write.
Well, what an interesting life you're, you're leading. I mean, I just love it. I love it.
I'm very thankful to be able to do this, and I do want to put this plug in because I've learned not to feel the stigma about it. My thorn in the flesh, I suffer from depression, something that I dealt with for 20 years. But I'm an example that God can even take that and use it for good. And it hasn't kept me from writing books and traveling the world, but it's because of good doctors, good medications, and God's healing. And the reason I want to throw that in, someone's going to be watching this interview. You know, we authors are very prone to despair and depression.
Yeah.
Artistic people are.
That's absolutely true.
In fact, I'm writing a book about my journey called In the Wilderness. But I want to encourage anybody who hears this or has a family member that there is help out there. There are gifted doctors and medications. There's been such a stigma in the Christian community on depression over the years, and that is changing, and it should.
It should, yeah.
And I'm the poster boy that you can struggle and still have a very full, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful life.
Oh, well, God bless you for that. I mean, yeah, that's a ministry, I think, in and of itself, too. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, this has been so much fun, and I
knew it would be.
Oh, I knew it would be. Yes, I've been so looking forward to, when we would get to do this. I do want to say to those listening, Curt's website is at creekbank.net, and you will want to go there. I mean, he's got, even if he was talking about his grandson, there's a picture of his grandson at the graves, and that. I saw that this morning. That was really cool. He writes memorable stories. This is from his website. Writes memorable stories of the history, culture, and people of Louisiana's Piney Woods region. He really does get deep into that. It's just wonderful. Sign up for his newsletter so you'll know where he is and what he's doing. I get his newsletter, and it is one of the ones I try to read. You know how you subscribe to a lot of newsletters, but Curt's is one that I keep my eye on.
Thank you for that, Johnny.
Yeah, I do. Fit Bullet. There we go. Wonderful book. I really enjoyed reading it. All about the Louisiana maneuvers, which I'd never heard of before. Even though I'm a World War II nut. I mean, I love World War II stuff, but had not heard about the Louisiana.
That's why I wrote it. We have a saying, Louisiana helped win the war.
Yeah.
Not only were they training new products like the Jeep and certain airplanes, but the leaders. There's a colonel that when he left here, he was a general. His name is Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Oh, wow.
He was a colonel with the Blue Army, and he showed that he was a genius at logistics. And so he immediately was sent to Washington by George Marshall, and he was made a general. And I think you know the rest of the story.
Well, yeah, wow.
He proved himself here in Louisiana, and every old person here had a story about him. I think not everybody could have seen Dwight D. Eisenhower, but
Claim they did, but
George Patton was here. He was very well known because of how flamboyant he was.
yeah.
But all the great generals, Mark Clark, Walter Kruger, all the men that would be names in the U.S. Army during World War II, they were cutting their teeth here in Louisiana. And so we proudly say we
Wow.
helped win the war. We have a historic hotel that just celebrated its 110th anniversary, the Bentley.
Mm-hmm.
They opened up the room where supposedly after the war games, that these generals sat down with a map of Europe and a map of the wars they just fought here. And they said, what did we learn from this Louisiana time we will use in Europe? Because they knew they were going to be fighting in Europe sooner or later. Of course, Pearl Harbor comes about 2 months later, and we are fighting in Europe. It's a while before we get to Europe.
Right.
But the first battle plans of how we would come ashore in both North Africa and Normandy were laid in that room at the Bentley. And the other day when I stood in that room, I could just nearly feel a chill come over me thinking that this is where these men who would lead us to defeat one of the most evil regimes that ever existed, that a lot of the plans were launched in Louisiana. So you can tell I'm a proud Louisianian.
Well, yeah, and with good reason. I mean, the scope of that thing was just so huge, and you know, and I enjoyed what you said about, you know, you'd be walking and some, like your dad would say, oh yeah, that's from, I mean, like decades later, it's like, oh well, that's because of the Louisiana maneuvers that
Right.
cable in a tree or a track, like a tank track
Yeah.
or something. So well, yeah, that happened ages ago. I mean, wow. Well, and now, you know, I thought we were going to close that, that you made me think of something else I wanted to talk to you about, was that this was also a time, and you bring this out so well in your story, the cavalry and the tanks, and you see this shift from, in the maneuvers, they still have the cavalry, but the cavalry guys are saying they're going to close this down. We're going to the tank units. And so
I'm glad you brought that up because that's a part of the book. The first cavalry came from Fort Bliss, which is near El Paso, and they brought their horses on trains. And the amazing thing, they did great in the maneuvers. They even captured a train. And I had one older man told me as a boy he watched 6,000 cavalry horses swim the Sabine River from Texas to Louisiana. I just thought I would have done anything. But the cavalry did very well. But the Jeep was first introduced doing this maneuvers. And the tank had already been introduced. And it was very clear to those soldiers that they were going to be moved, and the first cavalry became a tank battalion. And so this is part of our local history also, because I wrote a children's book that goes with the spring.
I saw that at the end of this book. It's
called Uncle Sam, A Horse's Tale.
Yeah.
The legend is, and I still see these wild horses in the national forest. Now these would not be the original wild horses; they would be grandchildren or great grandchildren, but the legend is that a lot of those old tough cavalrymen who'd been riding their horses for years realized that when they got back to Fort Bliss, their horses were going to the soap factory. And so they just turned them loose, even though they knew it would get them in trouble.
Yeah.
And what happened is that horse herd, many of the horses were geldings, but there were enough stallions and mares that they reproduced. And they're still there. Now, the Army at Fort Polk, that is our base that's in that area, they have tried to eradicate the horses. They claim they interfere with the training. It's very controversial because our folks take great, great pride in those wild horses. And recently, during turkey season, that's in the spring, I encountered a whole herd of them and followed them for about 2 hours. And it was one of the best 2 hours of my life. I just to see them and think that they're part of our history. But the cavalry, even though they did well, they knew their day was over.
Yeah.
I think there was only one cavalry charge in World War II, and it was in the Philippines, where soldiers went there before Pearl Harbor. But the horse was gone, and so
And the,
time marches on.
yeah, because it's like, you have characters saying animals shouldn't be in the battle, and yet there's also this, but I want my horse with me in the
Yeah,
battle.
right.
Yeah, it's very bittersweet, and it was.
Yeah.
I thought it was a real interesting.
And the children's book was really fun to write. I just pulled a story out of there. And what's neat is my artist, she was a high school sophomore then. It allowed her to get a full scholarship to college.
Really?
Her artwork led to a scholarship. So she was my partner in it. And I'm proud of Jade. Her name is Jade Ross.
Yeah, I don't know if we can. I'm going to try to hold
there you go.
Camera. Yeah.
You can see she's a great artist, and that's Uncle Sam, the horse. I named him that
because book. Yeah.
They would brand U.S. on the flank of the horse, and that's Sergeant Ed, old tough cavalryman, and he's telling the horse goodbye right there on the cover.
Oh my God.
Yeah. This book will make you cry too.
I know, I'm gonna get that book. Oh, Curt, this has been. I think I could just sit at your feet and listen.
We always have a good time together, Johnny.
We do. Well, by the time this airs, I think you'll be back from Uganda. But I do encourage anyone who's watching, please sign up for Curt's newsletter. Again, it's creekbank.net, and you can read all about his trip to Uganda and his past stories. They're all on there. He does a blog and so you can find out on his website some delightful pictures about his ministries and about his books, and yeah, just wonderful. So my one last question that I always ask everybody is, when you reach the end of your novel, what do you do to unwind?
I go hiking.
There you go.
I go to the woods. I get my replenishment from being outdoors, and whether it's a hike on the Appalachian Trail or just going to my farm, just getting on a tractor and working all day, or that's how I replenish. Yeah. Of course, you know this, you never really finish a novel. When I send it off, that's what I do.
Yeah, when you send it off, because I know it's like, oh, there's always more you want to do. Curt, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Best wishes in your continued writing. You're a gifted writer. Keep writing. We're touching the world through our writing. I really believe that.
We pray so. Yeah, I really do. Thank you so much. And everybody, thank you for watching. Invite you to come back next time for Novelists Unwind. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.